IT-säkerhetspodden presenteras i samarbete med Nordlo.
A passwordless society has been on the agenda for quite some time now, but personally I feel like I've never had so many passwords before. When will the shift take place? Will we see any revolution in this area, or will it be gradually changed in some way?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mattias. So, to our help, we have Dain Nilsson with us. Dain works as a director of engineering at Yubico, and in this episode we'll find out how we should work in a safer and smarter way. And besides, we'll allow ourselves to get a little bit more technical and discuss asynchronous key generation.
Okay, sounds exciting. And not only that, we also have some keys with us from Yubico, so-called Yubikeys, that we will raffle to our listeners. So join this episode and I'll tell you how it works. This is IT-säkerhetspodden's 168th episode, and my name is Mattias and the person who sits next to me is of course Erik Solitis. And with us is Dain Nilsson. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Thanks.
So, before we talk about the topic, almost 10 years at Yubico. How did it start?
Yeah, it's going to be 10 years this year. It started more than 10 years ago, actually.
Okay.
I heard about Yubico in a podcast.
So 10 years ago?
Yeah, 10 years ago. Yeah, it was 2008, 2009, something like that.
I almost wanted to ask, did we even have podcasts back
we
then?
did. We had a few, not as many as today, I'm sure. This security researcher was talking about Yubikeys, which he had just discovered, and I got really interested, and I thought, wow, that seems really cool. And then I found out that, this was actually a Swedish thing. And as a matter of fact, the little startup company that was producing these things was right down the hall from where I was doing my master's thesis at the time. That's where it started. Yubico had a competition that I joined and kind of got to know the company a bit better. It wasn't quite time for me I had just started working at a different company and I was trying that out. As I mentioned, I was just getting my degree. But a few years later, it was time, and I talked to Stina, one of the founders of the company, and I've been with Yubico now for 10 years.
Okay, but you have a developer background, right?
Yep.
So what kind of experience did you bring with you to your work today with that kind of background?
Well, so 10 years ago, we were a very small company and everyone was doing a bit of everything. So I joined as a developer. I've been working, I did a little bit of the code that actually runs on Yubikeys, but I haven't touched that in a long time now.
Okay.
I've worked a bit more on the desktop side, a bit on Android. Now I run a team that still works a lot with like end user applications, so mobile apps, desktop apps, some open source libraries and things like that.
Okay, so what's Yubico? What kind of company is that today?
It's a much bigger company.
Yeah.
I would say that we're in some ways we're kind of like a startup, but in many ways we're also past that, growing a lot, doing a lot more things. So of course, originally it was the Yubikey, and the Yubikey is still at the center there, but there's a growing sphere of things around that as well.
Yeah.
Some supporting roles, or what are you talking about around?
So there's one thing to just provide the hardware itself and nothing else, and that doesn't get you that far. Maybe if you're only using open standards and there's like other use cases already. But as we've engaged in developing some of these standards further, inventing some new standards, there's a whole ecosystem of things that need to be built up. So there's like I said, open source libraries for integrating support in your servers. There's apps for configuring your Yubikeys and using them for various other systems. Yubikeys today support a bunch of different protocols. So there's all kinds of space for additional software or services to help out.
I actually bought one of these a few months ago, and my experience was that, okay, you plug it in, and it creates some kind of fake keyboard there and generates this string. And it felt a little bit limited, but what you're saying basically is it can do a lot more than just that.
Yeah, that OTP string was the only feature available when the Yubikey first launched. And today, the Yubikey can do a lot more. So we still have that functionality, but there's we also have the Yubikey functions as a smart card with several different smart card applications. So it can work in more like standard enterprise setups. We have the newer FIDO protocols, webauth N. That's a completely new standard that we, together with others, developed to solve a lot of the problems that still exist with these OTP-based solutions.
So basically put, this is where it's better than the old smart card technology because it feels a bit stale. Have you seen any development on smart card for the last 10 years?
Yeah, in some ways I would say that these FIDO protocols are kind of the next evolution of that. So the Yubikey brings that you don't have to have these clunky smart card readers, but the new protocols also they're baked into the platforms in a different way. So you don't have to have a specific middleware and a specific backend. It's open standards. It's built into the browsers. It's really bringing the security of smart card to the average user for regular sites. Logging into Facebook or Google or GitHub or other sites like that.
Yeah, that seems kind of exactly what smart cards needed to be back in the day, because I remember you had special readers for them, you had to have software, licensing, and a lot of things, and it didn't really feel anything else than cumbersome. So with the Yubikey, then I guess it's for everyone.
Well, that's certainly the hope, and that's why we also have support for so many different protocols. Because if you're a small new company, then maybe it's not that difficult to just jump on the latest, most secure, best of breed type things. But if you're an older company that's been around for a while, you have a large infrastructure, it's not that easy. You have a lot of older legacy systems that still need to work.
Yes. We're going to see if it's for everyone, because I have some different scenarios later on. But first I would like to talk about Passwordless. I hear that a lot, so that we're going to a passwordless society and so on, but when can we stop using our passwords?
Yeah, the standard answer to all of these type of questions is it depends, right?
Okay.
So with these new protocols, specifically the webauth N protocol, this enables completely passwordless scenarios. It doesn't support maybe everything, and everything you want to use probably doesn't support it. So I would say that a specific service today could enable it using this, and mainly that would be for kind of browser-based authentication. So any website you log into, if they wanted to and they had the resources, they could implement this. Of course, when can you stop using passwords completely is going to wait until everything you use has kind of made this shift.
Okay, so it's up to the developer of that website to develop integrations to Yubikeys.
Yes, and it's not specifically into Yubikeys, but it's this open standard.
Okay.
So webauth N is standardized under the W3C, and the FIDO Alliance standardizes a lot of the hardware component to that. So how does a computer talk to a Yubikey or some other security key? So that all happens in a standard way, so that you're not tied to a single vendor.
Yeah, but if you're using normal things like Netflix, social media things, and maybe Gmail and so on, are all these supporting FIDO? Or?
Many of them support FIDO. I don't. Yeah, I don't remember exactly which ones do and which ones don't. But they don't all support the passwordless use case. Sometimes you need passwords for other things, for other legacy reasons, and for something like Netflix, then you have all these smart devices that you probably need to log into, and maybe it doesn't work to have a Yubikey that plugs into your TV.
Okay.
When it comes to passwordless, there is a rather recent development where the hackers are trying to fool people into kind of click on this authorize thing that pops up by simply spamming it.
Yes, this is something that we have been seeing. So I would say for all of the OTP-based protocols, one of the biggest attacks that they don't protect against is phishing. So if you get tricked to go to a website that you think is Facebook, but it's actually not, they'll trick you for your username and password, and then they'll trick you for that one-time code as well. It's not something you're not expecting. The maybe more recent, but slightly different approach to that is you have these push notification apps. They're a bit easier to use than OTPs, but they have that same flaw. So if you're tricked, you go to the website, you enter your username and password, and then you get the push notification to your phone, and you accept that because you're trying to log in. And if you're not trying to log in, if you're just spammed with that enough times, suddenly it happens when you're in a rush and you're not really paying attention, and you might have pressed the wrong button by mistake.
Or maybe you say, I don't know what's going on here, I'm going to say yes, and then it goes away. And surprise, it does.
Yep.
But how does a Yubikey solve that?
So the way a Yubikey solves this through webauth is the model is based on the browser being a big component in this. The browser or the platform, I should say. It might be part of the operating system even, where if you go to a website today in a regular browser, you have a server certificate typically if it's a TLS connection, and the browser uses that to verify that the server is really who I am expecting to talk to. Now, who am I expecting to talk to in that situation is defined by what's the domain that's present in the URL bar. So it's still like prone to user error in that I might mistake a 0 for an O or something similar. But what is shown in the URL bar matches the server because of the certificate, and that verification happens. So when you add the Yubikey component to that, the browser does this verification, but it also takes that domain and sends it to the Yubikey. And the Yubikey knows which credentials it has. Like each credential is tied to one specific domain. So if you're being phished, even if you as a human can't tell that that's a 0 and not an O, the Yubikey will get a domain name that just doesn't match the credential it's trying to use. So it will immediately reject it.
All right.
So that kind of protects you from those phishing-based attacks.
Okay. Right, but how do I get started? I got one of these keys. We're going to talk about them. I just plugged it into my computer, but there was just one button on the key, and that generates a key. How do I configure it? I couldn't find any applications or anything. How to get started with it?
Yeah, so I would say one of the easiest ways to get started is this webauth protocol again. As long as you have a browser that supports it, which is all the major browsers nowadays, you go to the website where you want to add support for Yubikey. And if they do have support, then it's probably in your settings somewhere, where you would typically go to change the password. There's probably a section for adding like 2FA. They might support a few different protocols. They could have something that's app-based or maybe SMS-based. And if they have something that says security key, or maybe it's called webauth or maybe something else similar, that's probably referring to this. The way it works is you press the button, your browser will tell you to insert your Yubikey if you haven't already done it. Or it won't say Yubikey, it'll say security key. And then it'll start blinking and you touch the button. Depending on your setup, you might have a PIN that you're using to protect it, in which case you might have to enter that. But then it's done.
Okay.
And then anytime you're logging in, again, depending on the site settings, it might be that you only need to authenticate once every 30 days with a Yubikey. Or it might be every time, so that kind of depends. But again, just plug it in, tap the button, and you're done.
Yeah, and normally you can have it on. You can add it onto your keychain, for example, and then you have it in your pocket, your backpack, and so on. And what happens if it gets dirty or something like that?
Yeah, I was thinking about that because it seems a little bit brittle, that gold-plated part.
Yeah, I mean, we have a few different models. I think in general, I would say that Yubikeys are really rugged. I've had a few of them on my keychain for almost 10 years now, and I haven't had a problem. Due to the nature of the connectors, I'd say that USB-A is more rugged than USB-C. Just the port, like it can get crushed.
It's bigger, basically, huh?
It's the actual connector is bigger, but it's a lot more complex than USB-A. So it can get damaged. And I mean, you should always be prepared in case you lose your key some other way. So how do you prepare for that? Well, our recommendation and what's implemented by most of these sites is they don't limit you to adding a single YubiKey. You can add multiple keys so that you have these different backups. So if you lose one, then you still have a backup key that you can access the site with, and then you can revoke the first one if you dropped it somewhere. You don't want someone else accessing it.
Seems like you get a lot of riding on that key. I understand you have a backup. Great. But I might lose it today, and the backup is in a safe in my home. So is that a problem? Is it should you have 3, or is 2 enough, or how do you...
It depends on how often you expect to lose things. I think if you have 2, and you lose 1, I mean, it can be a problem if you need it now, and it's actually at home, and maybe I'm on a business trip. Then of course it's a bigger problem. But if you're okay with that, then if you lose your primary key and you need to move to the backup, then maybe at that point get another key so that you're not without a backup from then on.
I totally get that, and that's great. But I was thinking there are other methods to restore keys, like get an email with it, you get a code on a paper and stuff. Do you want to use that when you're using this twin key, so to speak? Is it making it less secure?
It can make it less secure if the authentication used for whatever recovery mechanism is in place, or the I forgot my password or I lost my key thing. If that's an easier target to break, then that's probably what the attacker is going to do. So you do need to be careful with that. Like, I wouldn't recommend having an SMS-based code as a backup, because we know that those can be broken. However, if you have an app-based solution as a backup, maybe that's good enough for you.
Yeah. Okay, but that's a good answer. So basically, you don't want to have 2 big, sturdy front doors and some back door that's basically open, like an SMS or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, have we talked enough about the asynchronous remote key generation?
Yeah, except you can't pronounce it.
Yeah, it's very hard. But ARKG. What's
YMCA.
that? What's that? Yeah, I don't know. What's that?
Yeah, there are so many different acronyms and different things in this industry. It's difficult to keep track. So this ties into webauth and actually this problem that we're discussing about what happens if I lose my key.
Yeah.
I think that's the most common question we get. What happens if I lose my key? And we've been trying to think really hard about that. And one of the usability problems with having a second key and registering that is that every time I register with a new site, I have to go get that backup key and I have to register it as well.
Yeah.
If that's not convenient, or you for some reason forget to do that, then you don't have a backup for that site, and then you say you're going to do it later, but you probably forget about it. So we thought about this. An easy solution is to let's just copy the secret key material that's in the YubiKey to somewhere else. But there's a lot of issues with that. So the YubiKey promise is kind of that if you have a private key or some secret that's stored into the YubiKey, you can use it with the YubiKey, but the YubiKey will never spit it out.
Yeah.
I mean, if someone gets your key, they shouldn't be able to extract this stuff. This is the highly secret stuff.
Yeah, totally get that. And you shouldn't copy the private key to another YubiKey. I read I actually watched the webinar you had there. And it's a good point, because it kind of breaks the whole security model if you did.
Yes. So that is what makes this really hard, is how do we make backups easier to use without compromising on the security or the privacy aspects of WebAuthn. Another big privacy aspect of WebAuthn is that if you use the same YubiKey to register to a bunch of different sites, each site gets its own separate credential. And even if all those sites get compromised and some attacker is looking at the contents of their databases, nothing in WebAuthn will tell them that this is the same physical user. For certain people, that's really important. Knowing that this person has an account with that site might be a big security problem for them.
Yeah.
So with all these restrictions, the problem for us was how do we solve this? Really without compromising on those, and that's where this asynchronous remote key generation comes in. So it's, of course, the math behind it is complicated. I'm not going to go into those details, but and I should also mention that this is just a proposal that we've put forward. It hasn't actually been implemented yet or baked into the standard. But if it does, then essentially the way it would work is you would get 2 YubiKeys. You would use some type of software to pair these keys once, and at that point you would designate one the backup key, and that would export some type of backup seed that gets imported into your main key. And at that point you can put the backup key in a safe, and you don't have to get it out unless you lose your primary key. And then you use your primary key, you're registering it to new sites, you're logging in, and almost seamless to you, or it's visible, but it's not something that you have to jump through hoops to do. The main key could then use this algorithm to generate new public keys that get registered with the site as a backup key that your backup YubiKey can produce the private key for. But we are still keeping that promise of the private key for that public key only exists on that one YubiKey. So even though your main YubiKey is creating these new public keys and adding them as backups, even it can't produce the private key, so it can't sign for that key.
That was quite a story there. I tried to follow you, but
Sounds magical almost.
yeah, but actually I'm thinking about first, if you lose your main key, you bring out the backup key. How do you revoke the main key? You want to say, no, I'm never ever gonna get that back because I threw it in the furnace.
So that is part of this this extension that we're proposing, is that when you get out the backup key and you go to your site, there's some type of flow there that should be kind of similar to, if you lose your password, you say I lost my key, and then it asks you for your backup key. And if you then use your backup key there and complete that, it should automatically revoke your main key.
Okay, and then the backup is the main.
Exactly. So the backup gets promoted to the main key. Is one way you could do it. I mean, you could also have a new main key that you're registering in that instance. But I think that's the easiest way to look at it, is your backup becomes your main key.
Okay, yeah.
And then you repeat this process. You can buy a new key and add that as a backup to the one that was your backup. So when your backup key becomes your main key, you have a new key that's a backup to that. Yeah,
This is not working. I need visual aids here.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have skipped math class.
Probably not.
No, we haven't even gotten into the math now.
No. Okay, we can listen to this in slow motion and maybe understand it. But it sounds almost magical to have your backup key stored in the safe, and yet somehow it keeps updating all your. But okay, anyway, so I'm gonna go through some scenarios. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. From a user perspective. So, okay, let's say I'm a business traveling man, always using my mobile phone as my main work tool. How should I use YubiKey in a secure way?
Well, so I would use one of our YubiKeys that has support for NFC, which is a really nice user experience. When you're on a mobile phone, you can tap it. The WebAuthn protocols work over NFC, so anything that you're using that is browser based should kind of work the same way from your phone as it does from your desktop. If you have other specific apps that might not support WebAuth, then you can always use the older one-time password protocols as well. So it's these 6-digit, typically 30-second codes that you have that are used almost everywhere. So those can work with the YubiKey as well, where the actual seeds used to generate those are stored on the YubiKey.
But for example, if that person uses Outlook, for example, does that support Oath then? No?
I'm not. Let's say Outlook on a phone. I don't know what type of
okay, but let's say it does that. You open your app and then you just tap the key to your phone, and that's it.
Yes, if you're using depending on protocol, something like that.
Okay, I'm gonna play who like to work hybrid way, and since it's post-pandemic, I work a lot from the company's laptop, of course, and from home. How does that work? I connect by using VPN from my home, for example.
So a lot of VPNs have support for some protocol that's available on the YubiKey, and that is one of the nice features of the YubiKey, is that you can move it between devices as you're using them. I would say, as a convenience thing for your laptop, I'm assuming you guard that very well. If it's a company laptop and you're not leaving it around, you could use one of our nano models that are they're small enough to where you can leave it basically plugged in all the time. You shouldn't do that if you're going to leave your computer without keeping an eye on it. But as long as you're careful about that, then it's really handy. You can put your laptop in your bag and it doesn't really stick out, and it's very convenient also.
So for example, if the VPN connection is established and then I unplug the key, will it disconnect the VPN?
Most VPNs, I don't think they're set up to do that. I mean, technically they could, but usually you would authenticate just when you're connecting, and then it's established for that session.
Yeah. Okay, another scenario. I'm a hardworking shift worker who works at, let's say, a nursing home, and I have a shared working computer at that place. How does that work? Is there some smart way to work on a shared computer?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. And I think we've seen some similar setups where you have people working with shared computers, and they might have to wear like gloves, and it's not convenient for them to pull out a keychain and plug something in. There might not be a place to plug something in. We've seen solutions where you take our NFC-enabled YubiKey and maybe integrate it into a bracelet of some sort. So it's actually it's covered in plastic, and it sits on your wrist, and you just kind of tap your arm against this little NFC reader, and that will know who you are, and it can log you in, and you don't have to actually take your gloves off or do anything.
Sounds cool.
Great idea, actually. Yeah. I was thinking about you did that with Bluetooth back in the day. So you had some kind of Bluetooth device, and when you came into proximity of the computer, it would log you in. But this is better because Bluetooth has a much larger range. You might actually inadvertently activate and log in on someone else's computer if you're kind of sharing it. So this is more like what you're doing when you kind of...
Yeah, it's a much more deliberate act.
Right, last scenario. Ready? Okay, I'm a worker who have customers all over the world. I'm a little bit sloppy, so I lost my YubiKey somewhere in the world. How do I log on in my computer or applications? We have touched it a few times.
Yeah, we've touched on it. So again, I would say, you obviously have a backup, of course. Yeah. So you use that.
But the safe is home, and he's out traveling.
Oh, you're out now. Yeah. That's going to be that's a bit tough. I think if you're traveling that much, it would be good for you to have some way of getting it, like a trusted person or something that you can call and talk to. If this is about getting into your workplace systems, then you probably have some IT administrator or someone who hopefully has a secure way of getting you that access you want to, without having to cancel your trip and go home.
Oh, no. Otherwise, you might actually want to bite the bullet and actually have a backup method like another authentication device. Okay, it may actually decrease security somewhat, but it may be a trade-off.
Exactly. I think a lot of these security questions are about trade-offs. It's about what is your threat model? What are the concerns you have? Like, what do you think is most likely to actually happen to you?
Yeah.
And if you have something that is using Oath, like you have an app with these time-based codes, we know that those are phishable. But if you're only using those as a last resort, then maybe you can be extra aware when you're doing that and not be tricked as often. If it's something you do very rarely, then you're probably not going to be tricked out of the blue to enter your Oath code.
No, it's an acceptable trade-off. SMS may not be. I understand that. It's kind of insecure.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues there is that it's using the system that was never built and designed for security. So there's all kinds of holes in it because that was just not what it was meant to do. The actual network in itself can be hacked to where people can intercept text messages, but they can also call your phone provider and pretend to be you and then tell them to redirect your number for a temporary period or something, and they're trying to serve you as a customer, so they're going to be helpful and
too helpful. Yeah, we've seen that in a number of actually real cases where that has been done. That's kind of why I don't recommend SMSs. Here in Sweden, I believe the telcos are a little bit less prone to do that, but in America, yes, you said, it might be a little bit too friendly.
Okay. No more scenarios, but another thing, we have some keys. We got some keys from you. It's a lot of them actually. We're gonna do some sort of raffle, competition for our listeners. So we don't really know the rules yet, but we will.
We'll figure it out.
We will figure it out. Yeah.
In short, if you listen, you might actually win one of these, and they are really cool.
Probably something that you need to share in social media or something like that. But okay, let's go through with them. We have a Yubikey Bio. Fido, can you explain how does that work?
So this is one of our newest hardware models. It has a fingerprint reader. I think most of us have used fingerprint readers on our phones and maybe on our laptops. Basically, this does the same thing for the Yubikey. So it's not, the security comes from both everything that's in the Yubikey. So it's this hardware designed to keep secrets and only work under these specific conditions, but it's also verifying locally in the Yubikey that you are the correct person by checking your fingerprint.
Right, so if I lose this one, do I have to change my fingerprint?
Hopefully not. So the key itself doesn't store your full fingerprint. It's the way it works is it scans your fingerprint and then it runs it through a bunch of different processing algorithms, and it arrives at something that's called a fingerprint template. You can almost think of this as a one-way hash function. So if you're logging into a website and you send your password, the website typically doesn't store your plain text password. If they are, then you should tell them not to. They're storing something that they can use to verify your password. But if a attacker gets it, they don't know what your password is. So same concept on the Yubikey here, that even if an attacker can get your key and they can somehow read the data out of it, which is in itself really difficult because these chips are built to not let anyone do that. But if they could, then they still wouldn't have your actual fingerprint. They would have something that is derived from your fingerprint.
Okay, that's good, because I don't want to file my fingers down.
Yeah, and also we have this Yubikey 5C NFC.
Yeah,
5C?
So the Yubikey 5 series is kind of our flagship product. It has support for all those algorithms I mentioned. We have a few different form factors. So some have NFC, some don't. Some are the nano form factor, so that they're very small, but those are the ones that don't have NFC typically. Yeah. We have, this one has a USB C connector. There's one right next to it with a USB-A connector. That's the only thing that's the difference between those.
Okay, so 5C and 5 is just a different
Yes,
connector.
it's the connector that's different. And again, I think it depends on what devices you're using it with. So if you have a newer laptop that maybe only has USB-C ports, maybe you have an Android phone which has a USB-C port, then the USB-C version is probably a good bet.
Yeah.
And if you can't make up your mind, you get the last one there.
5CI.
Yes, the 5CI is our, it's the iPhone specific one, I would say. So it has two connectors, one on each end. So on one end, it has a USB-C connector, and it works just like the Yubikey 5C. It doesn't have NFC though, so it won't work with the contactless feature. But in the other end, instead, it has this Lightning connector, so it can connect directly to your iPhone.
Okay, cool. And the holes in the middle are for the keychain hole.
Exactly, that's where you...
In the middle? No, I hope not.
Somewhere, yeah. Well.
If you drill a hole in the middle, it will not work.
Yeah, don't do that.
So, Erik, you had a question before I interrupted you?
I was just wondering, this C connector here, can that work on the PC? I guess this is not just Mac. It's just...
Exactly, it can work on any supported device that has USB-C. So that means, a regular computer with Mac or Windows or Linux. It can work on an Android phone.
iPad?
It actually, for some use cases, you can use it on an iPad, but the Apple hasn't quite opened up all the capabilities for USB-C. So if you have one of the iPads that has USB-C, then you're limited to the webauth protocol and the OTP protocol, I think. But
the iPad has Lightning, doesn't it?
I think some models have Lightning, but many of them have moved to USB-C. So that's something you should be aware of. And I think all iPhones probably still have Lightning.
And other boxes in our competition, we got some of these boxes. Very
Yeah, it's
cool
a twin thing. It's like...
that's a backup key.
Yeah, but there are different connectors.
Yeah.
Is that the intended effect, I guess?
Yeah, I think these are some of our sample packs, so you can try them out, and that way, if you get one of those, then it should probably work with most, if not all, of your devices.
Yeah, cool. Because that could be a solution if you want this thing you spoke about, when you have one and then the backup. So case of two.
Personally, I use a set of different Yubikeys even for my day-to-day usage. So I have a small Yubikey Nano that's always plugged into my work laptop, and I'm using that as I'm authenticating every day, as I'm developing code, signing Git commits, and authenticating for SSH servers. I'm using that, I'm just kind of tapping the side of my laptop to authenticate that. And I also have a 5C NFC on my keychain, which I'm using with my phone more, mostly for over NFC, but also any other computer that I need to kind of quickly connect to and authenticate.
It seems like a good idea. You have a keychain of those stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a bit about the future. Let's say in 5 or 10 years, what's happening in this area?
Hard to say.
Yeah.
I mean,
10 years, maybe it's a long time,
attacks
but
are...
You are allowed to be wrong.
I'm allowed, thank goodness. I mean, attackers keep evolving as well. Attacks get better, which means we need to ramp up the security as well. These standards, I keep talking about webauth, but that's because I think it's one of the most accessible as a kind of consumer or end user. I think that standard continues to evolve, continues to gain a lot more support. So it'll be used everywhere. I think a lot more of these passwordless scenarios will actually be implemented.
Is there any big website or company that doesn't support that? You're kind of why can't they support it?
I think I would say that a lot of them support webauth now, which I think is great. Few of them support the passwordless flow, and it's only a handful that support that, and it's few enough for me that it doesn't, unless I can get to complete passwordless, as long as I have to have more passwords than I can remember, then I'm going to be using a password manager anyway. So it doesn't help that these 3 sites that I use support passwordless. But when that scale kind of flips over and I can get rid of most, if not all, my passwords, then passwordless is going to be a much bigger thing for me personally.
And that is where we need to be heading, because passwords need, sorry to say it, die now.
Yeah. Okay, I think, do you have any more questions, Erik?
Not directly. I think we've gone through all the important stuff. So
yes.
you're just going to have to figure out how to do this raffle thing.
Yes, so I guess the listeners have to read our copy or bio on this episode.
The description, show notes.
Yeah, description. Yeah. So what are you going to do next, Dain Nilsson?
Next, well, right now the team is working quite a bit on a big new version of our Yubico Authenticator app. So it's available. We have it on desktop, iOS, and Android, and we're working on a big kind of overhaul of the UI for desktop and Android, hoping to launch that this year. So that's going to be really exciting, I think. We're using new technology that we haven't worked with before, and it's a really fun project.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I noticed there was an app in App Store in the Mac OS.
Yes, so it's on the App Store for iOS and for Mac OS. It's in the Windows Store for Windows, and it's in the Google Play Store, I believe. So, new big major version of that coming later.
Exciting. Right. Thank you so much, Dain Nilsson, for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
IT-säkerhetspodden sponsras av Nordlo, din nordiska IT- och digitaliseringspartner. Med strategisk rådgivning, ett nära samarbete och med ansvarsfull och innovativ teknik hjälper vi våra kunder att driva digitaliseringen framåt. Läs mer på nordlo.com.